BG's tabletop live stream. I am just going to check the sound to make sure we're good. But I know it's been a while since we've streamed, and I'm super excited because this is going to be our first stream from our store. And I'm thrilled for our first stream for the store to have Dave Eng from University XP with me.
Mhm.
If you're not familiar with Dave, well, he's going to introduce himself here in a minute and share a lot about the University XP conference. We'll have some updates for BG's tabletop down the road, but today we're all about the Game-Based Learning Conference, Game-Based Learning Virtual Conference this weekend. So, Dave, could you share a little bit more about what we're doing today on the stream and then also more about that conference and
Sure.
yourself?
So you got it. Thanks, Dustin. So, Dustin, it's great to be back. I'm glad to see that you're streaming from the store. I'm super excited that you're able to launch it this year. I know it's been a really big and challenging endeavor, and I'm really glad that you're spending some time giving me some space to talk about University XP and also the Game-Based Learning virtual conference that's happening this weekend. So greetings, everyone. If you don't know me, my name's Dave Eng from University XP. I focus and specialize in games-based learning. My background is in higher education and learning and development, but also specifically using games and gamification for teaching, learning, and development. And one of the things that I've been doing, this is the second year. Last year was the inaugural year to host the Games-Based Learning Virtual Conference. It's a conference that's hosted entirely online. It's happening this weekend, Friday, uh, April 22nd, Saturday, April 23rd, and Sunday, April 24th, held entirely online. We have attendees coming from virtually every single continent. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to review some of the pre recorded content. That some of our conference attendees have put together. So the conference is broken up into pre-recorded content that people have submitted ahead of time that conference attendees can watch and review and consume on their own time. And those presenters are then going to be available at the conference this weekend to answer any questions that you may have. And there are also going to be some live events that are also happening this weekend. So again, today we're going to review some of the, I would say, the best of the pre-recorded content that we have up for the Games-Based Learning Virtual Conference. And again, I'm really just excited that Dustin has offered his time and space to be able to share some of what's happening on the conference this weekend.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you being here, Dave and Sharon. I'm super excited to go over some of these presentations because I recognize a lot of the faces. They've been on our podcast, and I know we've worked with some of them in the Game Based Learning Alliance as well.
Mhm.
So super excited to watch. And for me, I like mentioned to you before this, I didn't watch all the videos, so I'm excited for some first impressions on what they share too.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm glad we'll get to go through each one of these preview sessions together.
All right.
All right. So again, the Game-Based Learning Virtual Conference is happening this weekend. So it's Friday, April 22nd, Saturday, April 23rd, and Sunday, April 24th, 2022. That's available online. So that's gblconference.com. There is a $20 discount that's going to expire this Thursday, April 21st. So if you are interested in this conference, I suggest that you register prior to Thursday, April 21st in order to take advantage of that last $20 discount.
All right. Let's go to the first presenter here.
So our first presenter is one of our colleagues. This is coming from Dr. Jennifer Verriccio. Jenny is a senior learning performance specialist, and this is her presentation on the formative games-based activity development, perceptions for instructional designers. I don't know how many of your audience, Dustin, are instructional designers that happen to be working as instructional designers or educational technologists, maybe for different schools or districts or anything else. But what I really like about this particular presentation is that Jenny is a very recent certified doctor in that this is her dissertation. So she was really trying to focus on using games and games-based learning and gamification for teaching and learning, but specifically focused for anyone that's working in an instructional design field. I know that at least in the US, a lot of teachers, particularly in K through 12, are creating their own curriculum, creating their own lesson plan themselves. And a lot of that is based on really good instructional design. And the focus for this particular session that Jenny is putting together here is on the decision making process for instructional designers on developing game-based learning with active activity elements, and I think that's particularly useful. The video that I've highlighted here really goes into depth as to what specifically we mean by games-based learning, gamification, simulations, learning games, etc. Because I know that those terms can get kind of muddled. Um,
Mm.
I could say something, but I think Jenny really says it better. So I'll turn it over to Dustin so we can start this video, and then we'll talk a little bit about Jenny's preview afterwards.
The next is game-based learning. Game-based learning is defined as learning that takes place when actual games are used in the learning event. So leveraging something like Monopoly to teach about real estate. It's the idea of taking an actual game and using it in a learning event. The other term, gamification, has a whole bunch of different interpretations and definitions in scholarly literature. But for the purposes of this study, it's defined as using game elements in a non game context. So you can think of an online course that has points or leaderboards or badges are typically the top three most identified game elements that are typically used in online courses. And then we have game elements, which is another term that are tasks or pieces that play into the game mechanics, and they can be used to provide feedback. Think of baseball as an example. There are points, baseballs, bases, bats, etc. These are the game elements that are used to develop the mechanics of the game of baseball itself. And when thinking of game mechanics, that describes the fundamental gameplay itself, the activity or activities that may be repeated throughout the game. Putting this all together, formative game-based activities. In this current study, the term formative game-based activity was used to refer to any formative learning assessment that was gamified or game-based. So that's the concept of the formative game-based activity.
Yeah, so what I really like about Jennifer's video here, and you can go to the next slide, Dustin, is that it really emphasizes these different terms that we talk about. Because, I mean, like we use these terms pretty regularly, Dustin, but a lot of other people don't. So I think that particularly Jenny's overview does a really great job of defining what these terms are at the very beginning so that she can get into the in-depth approach as to how she uses it working with instructional designers.
I think what's really cool is the how she talks about game mechanics because I know you mentioned we're very familiar with this, and any board gamer that has played enough board games become familiar with what the term game mechanics mean. But
Hmm.
as someone who's not really into games or not into board games, maybe we don't realize that there are these components that make up that board game. Also, love her use of providing context for the term gamification because
Hmm.
one thing I like to share with teachers and educators is a lot of times teachers or schools are using gamification when they're not exactly realizing that's what they're doing.
Hmm.
One good example, or one example I like to share, is when schools have competitions of houses. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, they've done Hogwarts themed houses or universities at a school I worked for, and they compete and they earn points throughout the semester or quarter. And that's a very good example of gamification.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that again, some people are using gamification when they're really using games-based learning. Some people are using games-based learning over gamification. Identifying what those terms mean at the very beginning, I think, is going to be incredibly important. I think Jenny's presentation does a really good job of providing that really broad overview. So I'm glad that we have it with her, with us. And then again, the conference is happening this weekend. The date actually on this slide is incorrect. That's my bad. It's Friday, April 22nd through Sunday, April 24th, 2022. That's this weekend. If you'd like some more information and you'd like to register, the conference address is gblconference.com. There is a $20 discount available that ends this Thursday, April 22nd. Otherwise, it goes back up to its regular normal price of $297 in order to register for the conference.
Awesome. Let's go on to the next one. I know
Mhm.
it looks like we're having some issues with sharing the slide. It looks like it's shared on our screen, but actually on the live it's not sharing. So I'm gonna
Oh
see
no.
if I can
Okay.
figure that out while we talk about the next one.
Sure. So while Dustin figures this out, I'll just give you the broad overview. This next presentation, this is coming from some newcomers to the GameSpace Learning Virtual Conference, but I'm really glad that I was able to make their acquaintance. This is Martin Stegat from Nagata University and also Kurt Sampson from Nagoya University. So they're based out of Japan. And this one is using game pedagogy and principles for young learners. What I really like about this presentation overall is that in the past, and particularly for those that Dustin and I have interacted with in the GameSpace Learning Alliance, and then just other professionals that are working in the field, other educators and academics, is that we tend to focus on one, adult learners, usually like high school, up through higher education, sometimes corporate learning and development. But this presentation really focuses on the pedagogy and principles and use of games for learning for young learners. So this is going to be everywhere from, I'd say, like kindergarten, at least in the States, all the way up to maybe middle school. And this is particularly important because, like Dustin brought up before, there are a lot of educators who are using games for teaching and learning right now, which is great. We totally celebrate that. However, a blind spot that Dustin and I have, and a lot of the other professionals that we've talked to in the field, is that we are mostly working with adult learners, or at least young adult learners. This presentation really talks about how we can use games for teaching and learning for younger learners. Again, according to the presentation, as young as kindergarten all the way up to maybe about middle school. And the focus of this presentation overall is on game design and implementation on the practical applications for young children and learners. And I think that's another really important step in that usually when we're talking about these types of presentations, it's very much theoretical, how we could use games. This presentation really jumps into how games are being used by both Martin and Kurt in their respective classrooms. So that's the broad overview. Dustin, do you know if you got the slide figured out?
Yeah, it looks like it's working. We'll go to the video and hopefully it continues.
Okay. I am not hearing any audio, are you? Dustin, you have audio coming through on your side? Hmm.
All right, I think we'll try this one again. I did have
Okay.
audio on my side, but I checked the stream; it was not doing it. All right, let's try. All right, I think we'll try this one again. I did have audio on my side, but I checked. All right, I'm gonna see. I shared the screen. It looks like it's sharing on our end. It looks like it's sharing in the stream, and we should be good now.
So before
Yep,
we
I hear
watch a
audio.
clip for the game, the 4 goals that we thought of for the game, I've looked at 4 steps in using and engaging with the language of the game. One is the activation of vocabulary through their description of the picture cards. So they're giving the hints. Number 2, the student who's listening to the hints has to deduce the answer from those hints. 3, that student then has to take the answer, which they have in their head as a word or an image, and they have to connect it to the written word that's on the bag through their knowledge of phonemes and graphemes. What is the sounds of the words? How do those translate to letters A, B, C, D, and so on? And finally, they're using some fine motor skills by manipulating the magnifying glass tool, and this is the fun of the game to them, to locate and read the target word. So they're finding the word and also reading it out loud. So let's watch a short clip of the game in action. You got it? Okay. Yeah. All right. First tip, number 1.
Color is orange and white.
What else can you say about it?
Yes.
Oh, nice. Did you hear that one? Can you say it one more time?
Instrument.
Instrument. Do you guys know instrument? What's an instrument?
I don't know. Very cool.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Something that makes music, right? Okay. Can you give one more hint?
Yes.
How about the first letter? That's always helpful.
D.
There you go. All right. So D, musical instrument. Oh, I think we already have this. Did you find it? Oh, close. That is book. That's math. What is that one? Can you read it? Wait. Let me try. Drum. That's right.
Yeah, so a lot of really cute kids. I'm glad that Martin and Kurt were able to record that. And I'm glad that we now have other people in our community that are focused on using games for teaching and learning, particularly for young learners. I know that's the first time you saw that, Dustin. What did you think?
Yeah, I think it was really cool. I'd have to go back to look at their points, but it's very clear how they set up their scaffolding for the students to get from what they want them to learn, how they start with something very simple. And then also the peer to peer help too is really cool.
Yeah. And I think that whenever you're using games for teaching and learning, particularly for younger children, it's really important to communicate to them exactly what you need for them to contribute in order to successfully participate. And for a lot of younger learners, that could be very difficult, particularly when it comes to like attention and focusing and attention spans. But I think that Kurt and Martin did a really good job here of focusing in on that with these particular learners.
Yeah, the magnifying glass and appealing to kinesthetic learning is very helpful for younger learners too, and it
Mhm.
helps with that attention span, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Kurt and Martin's presentation. Again, focusing on games for young learners. This is all part of the content for the Games-Based Learning virtual conference happening this weekend, Friday, April 22nd through Sunday, April 24th. If you'd like some more info, just go to the website you see up there on screen. It's gblconference.com. There's a $20 discount that's available up to this Thursday, April 21st. All right. Okay, so this is another presentation, and this one is put together by at least two of our closer colleagues. This is coming from Naomi Paraselt, Jim Egan, and Emily Hipchin from Brown University. They're all coming from Brown University, and this presentation is called The Story of Stories Power. I've known Emily and Jim for a while. We've presented at other conferences together. Emily, this is the first time I've really worked with her for a conference presentation overall. What is really unique and cool about the work that Naomi and Jim have done, because I've worked with them in the past, is that they are from Brown University, and they work to put together an entire class based on literature that is gamified. They use gamification. They did not use games-based learning. But really, the focus of this class is on classic literature, usually I think American literature, and how that literature is interpreted as a student. But the students in the actual class are working to try to relate what it means to be human through this literature. And I think that's a really interesting take, because now students aren't just representing themselves in the class, rather they have to interpret these classic literary works and try to communicate it to an alien or someone else that doesn't have any background or experience at all on what literature is or what human literature is. They're trying to communicate to this person that has no bias at all as to what this literature means, and trying to communicate that meaning through our published works. This presentation that Naomi, Jim, and Emily have put together, the story of stories power, is really powerful, because this focuses entirely on the power of story for educational gamification of courses, assignments, and projects. And what I feel is particularly useful here is that it does not require educators or instructors to completely redesign their class. I've gotten a lot of questions about that in the past, about educators saying, I want to use games for my work, but I don't want to have to completely redesign my class. This session then would be perfect for you, because it focuses specifically on how to use games and gamification for teaching and learning if you just want to gamify one course or one assignment or one project. And there's a video that about this, specifically about the aspect of story that is applicable for a lot of people's projects. So Dustin, if you go to the next slide, we can see that preview there.
Sometimes I have to click it a couple times.
Hmm.
There we go.
All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about implicit and explicit stories and how they're manifesting in games and gamification and games-based learning. So with implicit stories, these are stories that, with these certain types of games, and I'll provide examples in the next slide, but it's really part of the theming and it's supporting the system that is created by the game and the mechanics that are happening. And obviously this happens to various degrees, but I think about the story on the back of the box type game where, you're reading, it's setting up you into the world, then you go to play the game, but there's not actually any explicit story that is happening. With that, you're just kind of launched into like this backstory that's literally written on the back of the box of the game. Whereas the explicit stories is actually having narrative and it's written with a specific purpose. So like with the excerpts that Emily and Jim wrote, those are situated in a particular place in the course to move the students in a particular manner through the experience. And I always like to say the course is not a course and the students aren't students, like, they're in a particular role. And obviously they are taking a university course, but we've created a whole world for them. And so the explicit stories are really important for the world building and helping them think about their role and where they're situated in that space. And stories are also the momentum that energizes the students' learning as well. And it's really important when thinking about what is the story's function at that moment and what is the student and the learner need from the story and how it's propelling them forward through the learning experience.
Yeah, so that is Naomi, one of the three presenters for that particular presentation, the story of stories power. Here talking about implicit versus explicit stories. Again, touches on some of the work that Naomi and Jim had done at Brown University. In that, in a lot of other courses, students are themselves, but in their particular course, students have to look at their course material through the lens of a different person. So Dustin, I know that's the first time you've seen that video. What's your feedback on that?
Well, I just know when I watched one of their presentations in the past. So I'm excited to go to their presentation, check it out this year too. I really wanted to be a student in one of their classes.
Mhm.
And the whole idea of, I mean, it's not part of that video, but the whole idea of having to communicate an alien that has no, I guess, pre knowledge of what a story is or what being a human is. And you have to be able to teach that alien by the end of the course is really cool.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that we often don't take into account our own biases whenever we are learning anything new. And I think that this is a really important concept in order to communicate what these stories and narratives mean for ourselves and our culture as a whole. And I think being able to remove that bias by interpreting this class through the lens of an alien or someone else that doesn't have that bias, I think is really compelling. And again, it doesn't have like gamified elements that like we've seen in a lot of other courses, and it's not very flashy. It's just asking
Mhm.
students to overcome that bias through the structure of the game and of the class overall. But this is just one presentation again of the Games-Based Learning virtual conference that's happening this upcoming weekend. So it's Friday, April 22nd through Sunday, April 24th. If you're just joining us for the first time and you'd like some more info, the website is up there on screen. It's gblconference.com. There is a $20 discount that's available right now, but that expires this Thursday, April 22nd. So that's all we've got for that session.
All right.
Dustin, you want to go on to the next one? All right. So this session is put together by Dr. Kezia Tinkle Williams over at Chandler Gilbert Community College. This presentation is called Teamwork Makes the Dream Work, Group Dynamics in a Gamified Learning Environment. And this particular presentation is very close to my heart, I would say, because Dr. Tinkle Williams is one of my past doctoral students. So Kezia had contacted me a few years ago and she wanted to start studying using games for teaching and learning in the college classroom. She had found me originally through my own doctoral study, and she wanted me to come on board as one of her readers as a subject matter expert in using games for teaching and learning. So I've been working with Dr. Tickle Williams and also her work and using games for teaching and learning for several years now. So I'm very close to it. I'm very glad, and I'm also very proud that Kizzy has been able to put together this presentation for us for the conference in order to share her work overall. Now, the focus that she's really talking about here is examining group dynamics that arose from her own gamified class. So she teaches at Chandler Gilbert Community College, and how she's used those gamified elements to connect learning with students, between students with one another, students and herself as an instructor, and also students as the material. So it's really exciting work. I'm really glad she's able to share it in this presentation. And like the others, we have a short video clip of what Gazia is going to present.
Gamified learning environments are one pedagogical approach that can be used to enhance student persistence and retention. Gamified learning environments can use a variety of technologies and gameful activities to engage a contemporary population of a variety of student users, not just one. And then team-based competitive learning can also be used to create a positive learning experience according to the lived experiences of these students. And I think that's one of the things that isn't quite established in the literature, is that gamified learning can lead to a positive learning experience. And there are so many students, especially right now coming out of the pandemic, that are feeling that they are disconnected and they haven't really had that experience of connection. And I think that this study shows that although the guild points initially represented an extrinsic reward for effort, these points became really a meaningful source of pride as the semester progressed and as these students became more invested in the classroom and in themselves.
Yeah, so that was Kazia's practical applications of games-based learning in a teams-based environment. Make some note of how the pandemic has affected student learning in that particular higher ed environment. Dustin, I know that's the first time you've seen that video. What's your takeaways from there?
Yeah, and just to iterate what you just mentioned, it would be tough to tough to go to a presentation without having some sort of reference to the pandemic, and it'll be interesting to see. I know you hosted the virtual conference last year, and
Mhm.
of course, there was that overtone of the pandemic happening at that time, and a lot of presentations talked about that. But now, looking at a year from then, and now we're essentially back in the classroom, but we're still post quote unquote post pandemic. I don't know, depending on how you want to look at it at this point. Um, but things are kind of back to normal as far as in person learning goes. There's a lot of hybrid learning going on too. But it's interesting how she talks about that competitive learning experience to help with their sense of pride as students, to help combat that feeling of isolation that maybe they felt throughout the pandemic. Also, really cool that she talks about a variety of technologies, and I don't want to. You've seen the whole presentation, so maybe you can
Mhm.
help here. But I assume the variety of technologies isn't just digital technologies,
Mhm.
but analog technologies,
Mhm.
which is kind of my my favorite thing to do is use a lot of tabletop games in the classroom.
Hmm. Yep, she does. Dr. Tickle Williams does go into more detail about the specific technologies that she used in her classroom, and again, I think unlike some of the other presentations we've seen in the past, this one really addresses how the pandemic overall has affected teaching and learning in her own classroom, and specifically how the pandemic has affected using games for teaching and learning, which
Mm.
we haven't seen a lot of lately. So I'm really glad that Kazia was able to contribute this for this year's conference. Um, and I think that we had three presentations, Dustin, that I had queued up for today. For our next live stream on Wednesday, I've got four more previews that I have ready. But that's what I've got to share for today. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover for the conference overall?
Um, I would say I'm excited to be able to check out as much as I can. I know I made
Mhm.
a boo boo and I scheduled our grand opening the same weekend. Um, but I'll still be able to kind of check out some before we open on the mornings. And Friday we're actually closed with the store, so I'm super excited. I'm gonna throw it up on the TV and kind of have some check out some presentations while I can.
Mhm.
We're presenting. Kim and Micah and I are talking about how we can use communicative games and
Mhm.
target or use game based learning for communication to improve
Mhm.
that soft skill.
Yep.
Each of us are talking about different aspects of that, where I'm talking about persuasive communication. So sharing a couple games. We're actually going to play a quick round of the game. So
Mhm.
pretty excited about that as well. But yeah, looking forward to the weekend. I know we'll be back again on Wednesday.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that you, Micah, and Kim are presenting. I believe it's on Sunday afternoon my time, so it'll probably be late morning your time. And I'm just glad that we were able to connect and share this with your audience and in your store for the very first official stream. So I'm very proud of that as well.
Yeah. This is really cool. So we'll be back Wednesday, and we'll share a few more presentations, and the conference will be this weekend.
Nice. Thank you, Dustin.